so ungrateful. Welcome, everyone, to the 2014 State of Out Youth, a town hall. We would like to introduce our moderator of the evening, a returning panelist from last year, Shantae Richardson.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm your moderator, Shantae Richardson, and I would like to welcome you to the second annual State of Out Youth Forum. In just a few minutes, 6 incredible panelists from across the country will share their stories, inspire new conversations, and talk about the most pressing issues facing LGBTQ youth today. But before we start, I wanted to just dive into tonight's theme, intersectionality, identity, family, and visibility. Intersectionality is a concept that describes how different types of oppression, like racism, sexism, and homophobia, for example, overlap and intersect. It can be a little complicated to understand if you're unfamiliar with the term, so let's just break it down a little bit. Have you ever thought about what makes you, you? Take a second, close your eyes, and think of one word that defines who you are. I think that's good enough. Now ask yourself, if someone asked me who I am, and you could only use that one word, would they really understand your identity? Chances are the answer to that question would be no. And that's because who we are is so much more than just one thing. Our gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, culture, socioeconomic class, and so on are so much more, and they all play a part in how we experience life and how society treats us. We all know that people can face discrimination just because of who they are. So what happens when people encounter multiple forms of oppression? For example, a bisexual woman of color can experience sexism, racism, and biphobia because of their multiple parts of her identity that are marginalized. The discrimination that she experiences is layered and cannot be solved alone. Unfortunately, there is very little visibility for LGBTQ youth that are experiencing intersectional issues, and that is why it's crucial for us to discuss this topic tonight. But intersectionality doesn't always generate negativity. There are also some really amazing things that come out of many different characteristics that define who you are. Let's take family, for example. When you think of family, who comes to mind? Maybe a brother, a cousin, a grandparent, or maybe none of those people are a big part of your life. After all, who says family has to be blood related? Biology is just one way that we can connect with others, but let's think back to intersectionality and how many different things make up our identities. Should we limit our understanding of family to just those people we were born with? Absolutely not. And every one of these groups can help us, and there are many, many different ways you can think about family in a world with all these different diversities and possibilities. The possibilities of family are absolutely endless. So let's take me, for example. Sure, I have my blood relatives, but I also have my queer family. I have my athletic family, my performing arts family, my Purchase College family, and what I hold most dear to my heart, my Trevor Project family. And all of these families have come together to help me be a stronger and more complete person. In turn, I will never leave them behind, and I will always be there for them. And that's really what family is all about. So yes, it's true, intersectionality illuminates serious challenges that need to be discussed by our community as a whole, but it can also be a catalyst for finding new families and exploring who we are and embracing our full identities. Tonight, we'll hear 6 unique perspectives on intersectionality and how family, identity, and visibility play a crucial role in the lives of LGBTQ youth. And I can hardly wait to get started, but first I have a few short announcements. Don't forget to follow along with us on Twitter and ask our panelists questions using the hashtag OutYouthForum. And if you're in the room tonight, you can also use note cards, which were passed out earlier, to write out your questions. Later tonight, Gil Villegas with GLSEN will ask a bunch of these during our Q&A portion. Also, RJ Aguiar and Ethan Walker-Smith will be hosting a Google Plus Hangout immediately after the event, and guests who are in the room can join us for our rooftop reception. So let's keep this conversation going. But first, before I introduce these amazing people, we would like to show a brief video to share a bit more information about the organization supporting this panel tonight. Now for the moment we all have been waiting for, I know I have been waiting for. Let's welcome our amazing panelists. Please help me in inviting the panelists and the organizations that support them. We're going to start with Charlie Kerr for the Trevor Project. Next are Aubrey King and Ziggy Keys, and they're with True Colors. Now we have Giovanni McKenzie with Human Rights Campaign. And last but certainly not least, Anthony Nadeau and Danilo Machado with Lambda Legal. Now I'd like to start this out with going down the line and just introducing yourselves. So say your names and your PGPs. We can start with Charlie.
Okay, my name is Charlie Kerr. My PGPs are she, her, hers.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Muse, Aubrey King, and female pronouns.
My name is Ziggy Keys. My pronouns are they and them, or just Ziggy's fine too.
Hi everyone, I'm Giovanni Blair McKenzie, and mostly male pronouns, they. Giovanni works fine.
My name is Anthony, and my pronoun is he.
Hi, I'm Danilo Machado. My pronouns are he, him, his, they, them, theirs.
And I'm Shantae once again, and my pronouns are they, them, their, or my name is always great. So we wanted to start this off. I know some of them have a little bit of jitters. I like to tell them that this is a conversation. We're all just having a conversation in which a ton of people, maybe not in the room, but also out in the world, are viewing. So tonight we talked about intersectionality a little bit earlier, and it's a really broad and really big topic to touch on. So each of these people up here have their own perspectives on what this means and what those different identities mean. So we're going to start out with Charlie. And Charlie has some pretty cool things and opinions about intersectionality regarding privilege. So let's go on that.
Sure, so I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and for 13 years I attended a very conservative, very small, all-boys private high school. In fact, the same one my father attended before me. Now, you might be able to realize as a young transgender woman, that is not a terribly pleasant experience. I was frankly miserable for most of the time I was in school, from preschool to senior year. Because of how upset I was and being surrounded in an environment with constant racism, sexism, and homophobia, I began engaging in self-harm. I made a lot of very reckless decisions because I just didn't see a future for myself. But once I got through that, and once I had some perspective, once I had gotten into college and started transitioning, I looked back on all of that and started processing it and realized that no matter how miserable I was, that education I received was something that a lot of young people in this country, LGBTQ or no, wouldn't have access to. I also began to look at things like the fact that I always knew I'd have a place to sleep at night, unlike the roughly 400,000 LGBTQ youth in this country who are homeless. I knew that if I got into college, financially I would be able to go, and that my documentation status wouldn't stop me from doing so. And I just began to realize by applying this sort of lens of intersectionality how much privilege I really had. And I think that all of us can benefit from applying the intersectional lens to our lives and looking at the places where we do and do not have privilege, whether that's our gender, our sexual orientation, our race, our class, our ability status, the fact that we have documentation or not. And I think that once we do that, it really allows us to develop a more rich picture of who we are and what is our place in the world and what helped get us there. And I think for those of us who consider ourselves activists, especially those of us who discover we have a disproportionately high amount of privilege, like myself, we need to take responsibility for that fact and own up to it, both for ourselves and to other people, and always be conscious of that fact. For instance, I think that we should really, we need to look at the privilege we have, and if we discover we have more than other people, what we need to do is be mindful of that. We need to make sure we're not dominating the narrative. We need to learn how to be good allies to the people in our lives and people we're working with. And that means learning to step back, learning to listen, learning to let people tell their own stories. And I think once you start doing that, what you can do is learn to leverage your privilege and build a bigger stage and a louder microphone for the most marginalized people in our communities. And I think by beginning to do that, it is going to, just applying that intersectional lens in general is really going to help create a better LGBTQ movement and a better society, because we'll be more aware of the factors that are at work to put us in the situation that we're in, and hopefully allow more voices to be heard and create a more broad and more real narrative of what it means to be an LGBTQ person.
I absolutely agree, and it's amazing that to have young people that are aware of these things and that are willing to get that word out there. Like, these are the things that we need to look on, that we need to focus on and sort of build on as a community. Aubrey, so I know that you have some things you wanted to talk about with family and with acceptance and how that worked out for you and within your school and so on. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was raised by my grandparents who were like heavily strong, Christian people. And my childhood was kind of difficult for me, trying to discover who I was as a transgender woman. And like high school and junior high school was just so rough. I was bullied, picked on, beat up. And it was just really rough. And then after that, I met some friends that were in high school, and I started venturing out, discovering myself. And, it opened doors to a whole lot of stuff, like prostitution, crafting, and all that stuff. And after that, I found myself homeless, and then, okay. Okay, I found myself homeless, and then I moved to LA. I moved to LA with my best friend, who I thought was my best friend. And then, he kicked me out, and he moved back to DC, so I just had to fend for myself. And it was just a lot of discrimination within the LGBT community and within the trans community also, about being clocky, if you're real or not. And it really affected me because I was a type of person, I was never accepted, and I always wanted to have friends to accept me. So later on in life, things got better. I got a job and stuff, and I got my own place. And then I met these amazing people who were in the ballroom scene. My gay father, who is my mentor, they just encouraged me, guided me, showed me the proper respect, how to dress, how to do my makeup and stuff. And it was so overwhelming, and I felt so appreciated to have somebody to accept me just for me and not judge me and just be behind me 100%. Because he always told me, you got to go to school, you got to have a job, you can't craft for the rest of your life, you can't prostitute for the rest of your life. And it does get better for anybody out there who's going through what I'm going through. So that's just me.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I know there are many people out there that have that same story, that they are happy that you were here to share that with the world and let people know that this is going on and that there are ways to navigate this. So Ziggy, I wanted to talk to you because you definitely wanted to discuss about being differently abled as well as navigating within genderqueer identity. So we want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So with me, most of the time when people have babies, they have boys and girls, and they bathe them in pink and pretty pink things and pretty blue things if they're boys, and it's great. But, if you don't really fit that mold, usually the kid knows pretty early on, and the parents don't really get the memo quite yet. But that's okay. With me, however, it sort of started out differently because I was born with cerebral palsy, which made me walk differently, and for a while, my motor skills weren't as awesome, which was cool because I had physical therapy and everybody was totally behind me 100%. But at the same time, there's only so much support you can get before you realize that you have to figure stuff out for yourself. And with me, a lot of it was figuring out that I can do anything. I just need to find my way of doing it. And that just became something that was totally ingrained in how I function. So even though my mom I was born into foster care. So my mom has 2 older children, and then she adopted me, which was cool enough. It's just that in between having disabilities and then not wanting to wear anything that was presented in front of you, it made it really fun to get dressed every morning. So a lot of it was that because I was taught to be so independent and to be so self-reliant, it didn't make much to me because I would get dressed and I would go and I would accomplish things I had to accomplish, and that was just how things had to operate. Because really, kids pick on everyone for any type of difference they have, regardless of if it's LGBTQ stuff or if you're the only black kid in an all-white school, anything. Like, that's just how the world is. You think that you see difference and you cherish it, but a lot of people see difference and they're afraid of it. So they don't know how to respond to you or what you're doing because you don't fit the mold. Which is why I guess getting bullied, even though, yeah, it happened, it didn't really affect me because I didn't fit the mold from the jump start. Which, I don't know, it worked in my favor. But like, I'm not everyone, because I have a lot of friends who are transgender or genderqueer or even gay, and their parents just don't support it. And it goes beyond the point of, even if your parents don't support it, some people, well, they tolerate it, and I guess that's how I exist, because I never did a whole coming out type of process. I mostly woke up and did what I felt needed to be done and let people figure it out, because to me, straight people don't come out. Why am I coming out? To tell you what? Because unless I'm in a relationship with you, I don't think it really concerns you much. For lack of better terminology, and so it didn't really worry me. Being genderqueer is something that I identify fully with, and I like myself, and that's what matters, because you have to find your own way of being yourself, and as long as you're comfortable in your skin, you'll surround yourself with people who are just as comfortable with you as you are, because that's why they're hanging out with you. And I guess that's what I want it to be. I want it to be taught that it's okay to be different, and not just say it like written in a book, really cute. No, I want it to be, it's okay to be different, and show people that are different, and let children know things ahead of time, and don't shelter them from everything. Because honestly, children are way more perceptive than we like to treat them, and that's why I want to teach, and I want to be a photojournalist. I want to capture everything in the world that can be changed, and if I can't change it for myself, I can change it with help.
It's amazing. I told you they were all amazing. I wasn't lying to you. But next we're going to go to Giovanni, who has a really interesting story. You actually came to the U.S. 4 years ago. Do you want to talk about this?
Sure. My name is Giovanni Blair McKenzie, and huge thanks to the State of Out Youth for flying me here from Portland and the HRC Foundation for its work. I came to the U.S. 4 years ago, and talk about culture shock. I moved to Portland, Oregon, which is a very fascinating city. And over the course of those 4 years, I've had a very interesting life. You know, really realizing what it's like living in this country as a black queer immigrant in a very homogenous city. You know, waking up every day wondering, okay, is today the day I'm going to face racism? Or is today it's going to be about my immigration status? Or is today it's going to be about me being queer? You know? It's very fascinating. When I came to New York and I'm seeing so many people of color, it felt very weird, because I live in a city that criminalizes people of color. You know, we are seen as ugly and dirty and disgusting, and that does a lot of things to how you feel inside. So when I see, you know, a room full of people of color, to me it feels awesome. It makes me feel like I'm actually a human being and worth something. A couple of years, you know, I think it's also interesting living as an immigrant, because in a lot of foreign families it's not very accepting being a queer person. And I remember, you know, the first time I quote unquote came out was with a boyfriend. And I remember going on Facebook and we're like, hey, let's do it, you know, relationship status. And I'm like, okay, sure, let's do that. And I remember that night, and it was, you know, clicking the button, and it felt like, you know, Beyonce the night before she dropped her album, and she's like, you know, what is the world gonna say? And it's interesting. My family reacted just as I expected. You know, a lot of people had distanced themselves, and it was a very weird experience. And I remember not talking to my mother for a very long time. And interestingly, a couple months later, my mother called me, and I was like, okay, what's gonna happen? And she was like, hey, I am living in a house, and I'm sharing this house with a gay man and a trans woman. And I stopped, and I looked at the phone, and I was poking myself, I was pinching, it's like, hello? She's like, yes, it's me. It's like, okay, that's interesting. And this to me was a surprise. I wasn't expecting this. And yeah, my mother is actually in the room here today, here at the conference. I think the one message that I have is that, you know, the quote-unquote gay movement today is very different because of, you know, the intersections of marginalizations. And amazing people like Laverne Cox are teaching us that today. If you are a young person and you are going through stories of mine, really do know that, you know, someday, somehow, you're gonna get through it. And keeping your head forward and keeping that strong outlook and building a family around you with whether they're blood or they're chosen and getting through it. Thank you.
Well, Anthony, we're going to go to you next. And I know that you had some pretty strong opinions on the lack of resources within the foster care system. Do you want to sort of?
Yes. My name is Anthony, and when Lambda League asked me to come here, I was a little apprehensive because I was going to be in front of a group of LGBT people, and no one knows how to critique someone better than us. And what can I say about foster care that already hasn't been said? Now, I think it's a really important subject. Statistically, there is virtually nothing out there about the foster youth. The United States Interagency Council of Homelessness wrote, and they reaffirmed it, that physical abuse, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse is very present in the foster care system, and I've, which unfortunately experienced the latter. Now, a lot of times when I do things like this, a lot of people ask me, well, why were you in care? That question is irrelevant. Regardless of why I was in care or why anyone else is in care does not matter. The issue is the same: ignorance and complete lack of resources. 24 hours after being removed from my home, I was placed into a group home where I was sexually assaulted by a boy twice my age. Don't worry, it's not like Special Victims Unit. It was a lot downplayed. At a time where I should have been consoled and confronted and talked to, my sexual orientation was laid out flat on the table at 10 years old. They made correlations between my sexual orientation and the incident, asking me things like, was it consensual? Very much a part of rape culture. And people ask me, well, how is that supposed to change? You know, my sexuality, they never asked me if I was gay, because sexual orientation is thought to be something as, you know, in our society we stigmatize sex, we exploit it, and yet it's something so sacred. And how are we supposed to protect a group of children that we are refusing to identify with? I mean, you talk about most transgender children, and they know by the time they're 3 years old. While I may not know what the word gay was, I knew I was different. Fortunately, I moved to a really, really accepting home. She is old school, African-American, Pentecostal, strong black woman. And I was so scared moving to her house because she was a strong black woman, uber religious. But she was one of the most wonderful people I've ever met in my entire life. She was everything a mother should be. She never said, when she invited me somewhere, she never said, oh, this is my foster kid, which happens a lot. This is my child. And while she was amazing and wonderful and I loved her dearly, my sexual orientation was never on the table. And so I ask myself, people say, well, she must have accepted you, right? Into something what she said, was it acceptance or was it tolerance? And I think that's something our community really needs to focus on. There's a clear line between acceptance and tolerance. Just because I can walk through New York City and not be called a faggot, that doesn't mean I'm surrounded by the most accepting city. And I think that's so important. And until we recognize that, and again, people always ask me, well, what can I do? What can we do? And it's so easy to blame the Department of Children and Families and all these workers, but that would be an insult because I've met hundreds of workers, and if you've ever met a caseworker, you know they love their job. You know they love their job, and what can we do? And I think the ball is really in our community's court. I watched how our community went to Washington, D.C. and confronted the Supreme Law of Land and struck down DOMA. And I thought that was great. I was admired by the tenacity and the willingness and the strength of numbers. I think that's great. But maybe I'm dating myself, but I don't think that's enough. Maybe I'm dating myself, but I've read things about like Stonewall and people like Harvey Milk risking their lives for us. And pride, when pride meant something. Now, pride has turned into a spectacle, a freak show, and that is not how I see my community. This is my community, not a whole bunch of people doing cartwheels down the street. And I just think that's really, really important. And I think that's really great. So.
You're saying some really powerful things that a lot of people really need to hear. Danilo, you wanted to talk about resources as well, but had a different sort of spin on it.
Yeah. So my name is Danilo, and I am one of the 265,000 out LGBT undocumented immigrants living in the United States today. And I mean, just to pause on that, I can't believe we're at a place where that gets a clap and and not something a lot less supportive. So my coming out story got a bonus coming out story, got a bonus closet. It's kind of like a buy one get one free kind of thing. And it really happened for me my senior year of high school, where both of my identities became really entangled, and I really couldn't ignore them anymore. I couldn't ignore the fact that I was staring at the boy in my English class, just like I couldn't ignore the fact that I was not going through the college application process like all of my peers. And while all of those sort of feelings of frustration and confusion were really hard to deal with and really overwhelming, especially since for me they happened in a very short period of time. What they did ultimately lead to was a drive to organize, a drive to educate, and a drive to advocate for a community within a community that is so often silenced, so often invisible, and so often without a voice. So I made it my mission to not only come out in my organization where we were fighting for and with other undocumented youth like myself for college access, for in-state tuition policies. So I came out there and I engaged with them and continue to engage in the conversation with them about the other closet that they may not face themselves, but that they know so close because of their immigration story and immigration status. I made it my duty to even expand and look at the nuances of my particular intersection in terms of funding, in terms of resources. So 2 summers ago, I was at Funders for LGBTQ Issues, and doing work on LGBT immigration grant making and fundraising. It sounds really, really fun. But I mean, it was. But the reality is that only 0.5% of all funding that goes to immigration issues goes to LGBT immigrants, refugees, and asylees. So that, along with other findings that I was able to research, really stuck with me. And then last summer, counselor in Lambda Legal, as some of our panelists have touched upon, I was really looking at the intersection not only of LGBT undocumented youth, but LGBT undocumented youth in contact with the homeless, welfare, and foster care systems. And it over and over became clear how crucial it was that all of these youth in these different types of systems were acknowledged and accepted for both of their identities, and how a lot of times it really meant the difference between them getting access to some sort of relief or being deported back to their countries. And sort of what my intersection has taught me also is my privilege in having qualified for deferred action for childhood arrivals and being able to finally have a work permit and a social security number. But I know that so many of my fellow LGBT undocumented immigrants are placed in detention every day, and especially for trans immigrants who are often sexually violated, often don't have access to hormones, often placed in the wrong gender facilities. All of those realities became very clear through my experiences. So overall, although all of the challenges have been confusing and frustrating, they've also been really amazing to use as a tool for organizing and education. And I just want to challenge all of you to think critically, to think intersectionally, and to support anybody around you or in your life that might, take you along on their journey in coming out once, and if you're lucky, coming out twice.
Now you've heard just a little bit of what they've experienced, just the tip of the iceberg of their stories. I know that there are questions. Some people have handed in written copies. I know people have been tweeting questions, and this is the time when we're gonna get to ask the panelists some of the things you wanna know. But in the meantime, we all ready for that? Awesome. How y'all doing tonight? Good? Hey. Y'all look really good. I like it. Oh, right? Look at them. Okay, let's have another round of applause for them while we wait for them. All right. Well set. Awesome.
Hello everyone, I'm Gil. So we're just going to start with a few questions from our audience right now. The first question we have is for Giovanni. When you first moved to New York, you said you had a culture shock. How did it change you, if it did?
Okay, so just to clarify, I've moved to Portland, and this is my first time being here in New York. To note on the culture shock, I think it was, and I'm very happy that a lot of us spoke on immigration. When I came to the US, again, I'm from Jamaica. I'm used to seeing people that look like me and speak like me. And moving to a city that is only 6% black and more than 3/4 white, that was a culture shock. And I think, honestly, I really don't think culture shock is the best way to put it. I felt out of place. I never felt home. These are, I am not a part of the crew anymore. I was dealing with being gay in a very homophobic society, and now being the gay immigrant black kid in Portland, and kind of being that very awkward crossroads where it's like, okay, where do I go? Where do I stick? I am just a person. That was my culture shock. But I think what was great was a lot of people here spoke about family and building a family amongst yourselves and with people that are loving and are there to support.
Thank you. Our next question is, what are ways that the LGBTQ community at large can do a better job at being inclusive of the intersections of marginalization? Go ahead.
I spoke about, how we went to and challenged them, and I think that's great, and I think we really need to integrate ourselves even more in the foster care agency, in every aspect of society. There's so many gay couples, become foster parents, go to foster agencies, become teachers. And I think Doma was great, but 2 years ago, I moved to Vero Beach, Florida, and there's this gay kid who rides the bus every single day, because I take the bus, and I know he's homeless. And I asked myself, where is his group of people? How come where I live there, if someone attacked me because of my orientation, I have nowhere to go? Why is that? Thank you.
We have another question. I've been told that bisexuals are sex addicts, liars, or confused. Why do you think people hold this opinion?
Okay.
Sorry to put anyone on the spot.
Yeah. Like, a lot of that, though, is just a stigma. People think that bisexual means that because I like a female or a male, that I want everyone I'm looking at. No, it doesn't work like that. Like, everybody's here, well, clearly I'm the only bisexual person. So, like, at the moment. So, my logic is that you don't want to do every person you see. And a lot of that is because there are also the smaller subculture of bisexual people that seem to think that just because you can go out with a man or a woman, that you should do both at the same time. No, that is a different conversation. That is called polyamory. That's polyamory. I do not support that. However, if somebody does, that's cool. That's what they're doing. But that is not every bisexual person at all. No. That's what happened.
Our next question is, when facing so many adversities, what tools did you use to redefine your role as a survivor?
The internet?
Let's take it.
Sure. Could you repeat the question one more time?
When facing so many adversities, what tools did you use to redefine your role as a survivor?
I think, honestly, the best role is self-care. Seriously, at times we want to fight every battle, but, honestly, as someone who does a lot of activism work, self-care is always the best route. If you want to cry right now, cry. Tomorrow's another day. I would also say, secondly, family. I'll never stress this enough. When I was going through a lot of rough times, it was always finding family who they might not be blood family, but they were there. They brought you in, they loved you, they treated you as a brother, as a sister, as a person. Two things for me: family, self-care, and knowing that, yes, it might be a rough time, but there will always be a tomorrow.
We have a question about pronouns. Some of you express your PGPs as male or female pronouns. What does that mean? Is it different from he, him, or she, her?
You want to talk about pronouns?
Can I ask for a clarification? Because isn't she, her female and he, him male? So wouldn't that be the difference?
I guess the idea is that some people find definitions differently. Some people use various terms in different ways. So the idea is, how do you identify with your pronouns and how that may be different from someone else?
I just identify as she.
I
don't know no other way to put it.
I think I understand what they're saying, how some people will say he, him, his, and some people will just say male pronouns. It completely depends on the person. Sometimes I'll say they, them, their, and sometimes I'll say she, sometimes I'll say my name, sometimes I'll say Beyonce, but it depends on how I'm feeling in the moment, and that goes for everyone, and it goes for all of the panelists, and it goes for everyone out there that's watching. So you can't really ask someone to define what a pronoun means to them for everyone. I think you can sort of just ask that one person what that pronoun means for them.
And I guess to add on to that a little bit, I think that there are people who might use a pronoun that we don't traditionally associate with the sex or gender identity that we're talking about here. Like someone may identify as a man or as genderqueer or as a woman and use what's considered by society the opposite pronouns. And I think that's, at least in my case, that's why I tend to use literally what the pronouns are that I use, she, her, hers, because I don't want to make the jump to say that these pronouns are the men's pronouns and these pronouns are the women's pronouns and never the two shall meet. I think that there's a lot of room for fluid identities and for identities that might cause people to have to reconsider what they consider what gender and sexuality is. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that we should encourage that diversity and the ability to identify how people feel as opposed to whatever fits our preconceived notions.
Thank you. Another question. What's one lesson you would like to teach LGBTQ adults about being allies to LGBTQ youth?
I can go with that one. I wanted to go with that because, I do identify myself as a huge trans ally. And I think oftentimes when people think ally, they think something differently. To me, being an ally, the first rule is just to listen. Sometimes you want to play hero. Sometimes these people aren't looking for heroes. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to stop and just literally listen. Ask them, what can I do to help? What would my best role be? At times, we as young people know what we need to do. We just need to get it out there. As we're human beings. Sometimes we just need to cry. We need to watch a sad movie and just bawl our eyes out. Again, as allies, the best role you can play as an ally is to listen.
This next question's for Anthony. How do you advocate for LGBT youth in foster care?
I know who wrote that. I am a part of this thing called Florida Youth Shine. That's not me. And it's in Florida. And obviously Florida Youth Shine. But what they do is they take kids from 18 to 24 who have already aged out of foster care. And we meet, we have our regional meetings, so everyone where I live, they meet up. Current foster kids and ex-foster kids. And every 4 months, we all get together, and it is a big powwow. And we sit around and we talk about the issues that we've been through. And last year, we passed legislation, things like dependency, where, a lot of times when siblings would be separated, it would only be like full siblings. Now it's half siblings or siblings by marriage, like step siblings. And I think that's so important because I think once you've gotten to a certain age as an LGBT person, you really, even if you work with them, there's a disconnection between the youth. And who knows better what youth need than the youth themselves? And I think Florida Youth Shine is so amazing, and I think it's really something that every state should adopt. And so they're great. They really are.
So I have a question now, and it's how do you think you can teach youth to be allies to other youth when the environments that they are located in teach them to not be, such as their parents or their extended families?
I think something that I've experienced a lot is there's often a point of connection that you can make with them in terms of complications of identity, in terms of what they experience in their neighborhoods, in terms of sort of drawing the parallels between one type of discrimination and the other, and just having the conversation with them. How do you think, this act of racism in your class, or how do you think you being the only person of color in your school might be different and might be the same as somebody who might be the only out person in the class? And just sort of building those bridges and just trusting them in the conversations and kind of getting and challenging them to get to, the root of their thinking, and then just sort of have them sort of go through the process of making those connections, because they will happen, they will make the connections. They, as we were saying, definitely trust them on doing that, and trust that they might be more accepted and will often be more accepting than you might be expecting from them, and to not come in with an expectation that they'll be abrasive. Yeah, just make it sort of, make those connections happen is definitely what I would say.
Did you want to add anything?
I always found it a little bit different because in Florida is a lot different than New York, by far. And I always found if I saw other gay kids, we'd almost distance ourselves from each other, especially in high school when one sexuality is very obscure and you're not really sure who you are or what you are. And we distance ourselves. I know now, I help teach at a private school, speech and debate, and so when I see a young boy sashay into the classroom, I make sure I'm best friends with him. And I think that's so important. So while I don't have to ask him if he's gay, he may not even be gay, but I want him to know that I'm there and I get him, even if he doesn't get himself.
So now we have some questions from online. What are ways we can get students to fight apathy? How can we encourage activism when the ones suffering have no visibility?
I can speak on that. I live in Oregon, and one thing that's happening right now is Measure 88, and it's really focused on undocumented people in Oregon. And you hear a lot of really disgusting things that are being said. And one of them is, these people should go back to their countries. And sometimes I think of that, and I'm like, I never came to America on the Mayflower. I came here on American Airlines. But
Me too. American Airlines.
But how I see it is that, I came to this country with the same instincts as everyone else did, for a better life. And honestly, when you see people as people and for not what everyone else in society is saying, and you realize the person inside and what they can bring to a friendship or to a family, I think that's where the love starts and the apathy. Really understanding who they are. I became a trans ally through a friend that I had in high school. And his name was Alex. Came to the world, and the doctor said that he was a female. And, spending a lot of time with Alex and understanding what it's like to live in the world as a trans person, the first thing I realized was that, Alex is a male. Alex is way more even macho than I am, and it was a realization I made and an apathy that, sort of stemmed from inside. So, for me, how I see it is as, love comes first and understanding this person. And those two things are going to really provide for a successful future for that person, really allowing this world to just connect and see everyone as human beings.
Going off of what he said, a lot of things with schools is that kids need exposure. Because a lot of the times, allies don't come out of woodwork. Allies come because something happened with their best friend, but they realize that regardless of their household being unsupportive, that was their day one. Like, that was their friend, they were there first, and because honestly, not everybody has a supporting household. That's just not how it is. But you define yourself. Your household, your background doesn't define you. You make yourself. And the older you get, the more firmly you begin to realize that. Because I remember, I think I might have been a freshman in high school, or like 8th grade, and I asked my friend, what if I was gay? And he was like, we couldn't be friends because I'm too religious. And I was like, what is what does that with me have to do with your religion? But I didn't understand it, and I left it alone. I didn't bring it back up. But somewhere around 10th grade, I think, we were really good friends, and I was like, and this is my girlfriend, and nothing changed. Allies come from relationships. So I guess the easiest way to make it so that there's more allies in schools is make school a safer place for people to be themselves, so they realize that they have allies everywhere.
And I think regarding the apathy and the lack of visibility, I think that the youth that are seated here are great examples. Think about it as you should become that person that's visible. You can be that person that is visible for someone else that is dealing with the same thing as you. So instead of sitting around saying that there's no one like me and that this is never going to change, strive to be that person that's visible and that's out there and that's talking about these issues, so that the other people that may be younger than you or may be struggling, that are even the same age as you, see you out there and see that, okay, I'm not alone in this. So I think that's how you can combat it.
So this next question is for Aubrey. You said you were taught how to do makeup and dress. Do you feel like the Aubrey you want everybody to view you as?
Really, no. It's more than just makeup and hair and, heels. It's something inside, because I knew when I was little, I always felt like a woman, and my parents didn't understand it. They didn't understand it, so that led to not, I don't want to say rejection, but they didn't understand it, so they was just like, okay, we're going to let him do what he want to do, just go, and I don't know how else to put it, no. So.
So another online question. Who are the supportive adults in your lives, and what do they do to make them supportive? Go ahead.
I want to say my grandmother. My grandmother was really supportive. It was she was like my best friend. She always encouraged me. She would pull me to the side when I'm in trouble, it's okay, you don't have to freak out, I got your back, And she just always comforted me. And she allowed me to express myself, even when my my grandfather, my dad didn't understand it, So I would say my grandparents, my grandmother, and my gay father, so.
I can add to that. Talking about, support systems and allies, my grandmother as well was a huge support to me during that, coming out process. I remember running into my grandmother's room and just bawling. And she's like, what are you crying for? You're a strong person, be strong. And it has always surprised me. How is it that this, woman in her 60s from Jamaica is just like a big support system? And for her, she sees her grandson first and everything afterwards. And I think that's really how allyship starts.
Mm-hmm. Anthony?
I had an English teacher who was my debate teacher, so I was with him from 10th grade to senior year, and he was gay. And really, really attractive. And so I was drawn to him. But he was so instrumental to not just of me graduating high school and doing the normal things, but realizing really what gay was, because I think being a young kid, all you see is what's on television or on the internet. And I don't think that's a clear description of who we are as people and who I am as a man. And he was a graduate from Fordham, had his master's, was 23 years old, and really just in his prime, and still in his prime, because I think he's only 27. But he was everything, and he showed me that there's a future, that I'm so much more than, my mannerisms or the way I walk and talk. He was great, and I think he's watching tonight.
So we have an online question for Charlie. Loved what you said. What are the tips for looking to examine your privilege?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think for everybody, it's about building awareness of yourself and understanding that though I think we're all, the masters of our own destiny, that free will absolutely exists, our world is very much shaped by the forces of power and the forces of oppression and the forces of history. I think that, just looking at the obvious one, as a white queer person, that inherently gives me a lot of privilege. I don't face the same sort of police harassment that all of the people of color on the stage have probably faced before, and just that all people of color face. I've have had issues with the police before, but the same pervasive harassment is not something that I have to deal with, and it's something I need to be very much aware of, I think, whenever I'm doing any activist work and whenever I'm going throughout the world. And I think that you just need to start talking to people, but when I say talking to people, what I really mean is listening to people. We should put our assumptions and our way of which we think the world works on the back burner and just listen and research and not expect to be taught. We should look for knowledge ourselves. The writing is all there, the coverage is all there, and I know, at least as a trans person alone, it gets tiring having to teach everybody constantly what it means to be trans. And I'm sure that extends to every other identity as well. And so the information is already there, and if you have people in your lives who can act as teachers, that's even better. But I think that when we become aware of the fact that we may have more privilege than other people, we need to really, it never just becomes a settled issue. Your privilege shapes every interaction you have, or lack thereof, throughout your life, and every minute throughout the day, and everywhere you move through the world. And I think it's a constant process of checking your intentions, of making sure you're not dominating the conversation in the room or using your privilege to push other people to the margins. And I think once you start working to do that, it's an ongoing process, and I'm sure we all make mistakes, but it also allows us to really create a stronger movement for everybody.
So this question is for Ziggy. Have you ever had to defend your gender identity or had to define it constantly?
Absolutely. Because to a lot of people, they, them, it's not a pronoun, it's a plural. So you end up defending your gender identity more than you would think, but only on occasion. Because depending on how you're presenting yourself that day, you either pass 100%, they go for whatever pronoun you're preferring that day, or they just go by your name because you're a little bit too andro and they can't tell. But because genderqueer isn't something as concrete as being 100% transgender, presenting 100% male or female, it's something that can confuse people and make people take pause. Because it's your first instinct to say, oh, she's over there. And it's not something that was commonplace to be described as other. So it's something you define constantly, but it's something that I never feel bad about explaining. Because the more people know, the less you have to explain about it.
Ziggy, can you sort of explain what genderqueer means to you, to the audience?
To me, genderqueer means that I don't identify specifically as male or female. I don't feel like I fit specifically within a binary because some days I'll look totally female and other days I present totally male. It means to not, for me, it means to not have a specific preference to the point where I don't want to be identified as either on the regular basis because on other days it might make me uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I think to also understand that I do identify as genderqueer, and I think people might see it as, today I will identify as male, tomorrow I'm going to go all on she. And I think it's, to me, being genderqueer is, gender looks different for you.
Awesome.
Thank you. So we have another question for Anthony. My mother knows I'm gay, but we never talk about it. Should I not fear the subject and just speak up to her?
I think I don't think I could give you an answer for that. And I hate when people tell them there's coming out tutorials on YouTube, because I think that's ridiculous. And I think when, all right, where's the camera? I think when you know, you'll know.
I've been wondering that the whole time.
And that's so important, and I think we all fear that, whether our parents will accept us. And I assure you, if she loves you, she may not agree with it now, but she'll come around to it. I have faith.
What advice would you give to an LGBTQ youth who has been physically or sexually assaulted? Or how would you help them cope? Go ahead.
I think, because it really is a weird thing when something like that happens, because a lot of times, and you hear it on Oprah and everywhere, your body betrays you. And I think that can be a very, very difficult thing for a young gay kid to understand. And the only thing I can say is talk about it. You have to talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. And I always tell that, to the kids who I teach, talk about it. If you have a monologue and something about it hits you home, you have to talk about it. You have to go there, you have to experience it, because if you never talk about it and you always bottle up, you'll be haunted for the rest of your life. And I think it also creates a weird divide, because sometimes kids don't know, well, my body reacted this way, am I gay? Or talk to somebody, reach out.
What advice would you give to a non-documented youth or young woman unable to connect with her peers?
I mean, for me, how I first connected with other undocumented people was my mom found out about this meeting, and I came and I was very just arms crossed, and I really didn't want to be there. But long story short, I was able to find other people who were not only open about their immigration status, but vocal. They were, as we say, undocumented, unafraid. And that was really that was so powerful for me in terms of finding people who were also very frustrated with the barriers that the college application process and in their lives, and in their family lives, and in their families' lives were facing, and how frustrating those were. And that eventually led to finding connections as specific as meeting other queer undocumented people. So I would reach out to your networks and never sort of doubt that you'll never be able to find somebody who connects with your story, whether it be online, whether it be sort of a counselor that might see a presentation one day, whether it be through any other groups that might help make that first connection. And after that, the ball just really gets rolling for sure.
Be able to take one more question.
One more question?
Yes.
So what advice would you give to LGBT youth in areas of the country where there are no queer youth programs?
Sorry.
We can go.
Start one. And I'm done. That's my answer.
Giovanna, do you want to add?
Sure. I think, there are so many great people that came before us who paved the way. Lots of the organizations that even came together to put this event together, started with one person who was just fed up and just said, enough is enough. I founded an organization in Portland that specifically works with, queer and trans youth of color and immigrants. And I was amazed to see the support that we got, because people do understand the sort of intersections that are involved here. You find so many undocumented and documented immigrants who are fearful, fearful of being deported and sent back to their countries. To them, deportation looks differently. A lot of these individuals came out and are living a very happy lives and are living every day fearful. Am I going to send back there? All those people know that I am who I am. The great thing is that there are so many other organizations across the country that might be doing similar work and might be just as excited to be, working with you to build that platform and to build together whatever is needed to bring towards support and bring towards resources and, support you in your endeavor to do good work in your community.
Oh, going off what Anthony said, where he said start one, because we all have social media, it's not as hard as it used to be. Because if you're that one kid in your school, you also know that there's that one kid that's in your class that might be down for it with you, and soon enough, you'll have your own network of people that even if you don't have a set group, there will be all of you that just so happen to meet up after school wherever you're at in whatever town you're in. And you guys can collaborate. And soon enough, if that picks up enough people, then you can bring it to your school. You can bring it to a community center. You can bring it to wherever you happen to be, because now it's not so hard. You don't have to look at everybody one by one. You can make a hashtag. You can tag a picture. There's so many different things you can do to connect to so many people, to the point where even if there aren't that many people in your school, you can reach 3 schools over.
Thank you so much. That's all for our questions.
Thank you. Let's give our participants another huge round of applause. Let's give an applause for all of them.
You did it!
So tonight, we started a conversation tonight, and now it's up to all of us to make sure that it continues. The issues that LGBTQ youth are facing today aren't one-dimensional, as you saw. They're layered and intertwined in ways that cannot be untangled, and they're complicated, and they're difficult to solve. But that doesn't mean that we should ignore them or simplify these. So to the people in the audience or watching online, and even to the panelists and the organizers of this event, let's keep this momentum going. Now let's shed some light on young people in our community who were discriminated against and held back because of their sexual orientation or gender or socioeconomic status and even beyond. Show the diverse spectrum of LGBTQ youth that they aren't alone, that there are others out there who are like them and ready to offer support and celebrate their identity and be their new family. Can we do that? Awesome. Now, before I introduce our next act, I'm going to give you a reminder. I promise you it won't be the last time I remind you of this, but we want to remind you that there's going to be a Google Hangout right after this with RJ Aguiar and Ethan Walker-Smith, and Gil Villegas will also be joining that, so look out for that. But I want to introduce our next act that really ties everything that we've been talking about together. So have you heard of voguing? Have any of you heard of voguing? Can we put some hands up? Okay, I just wanted to make sure, a pretty good amount of you. So for those of you who aren't familiar, voguing is an intricate dance, and its history spans back to 40 years ago in New York among queer people of color, and it's inspired by poses and movements from Vogue magazine, and there are many different voguing styles, and the performances are absolutely amazing. So not only is voguing an incredible example of intersectionality, yielding something beautiful and unique, it also showcases the ability to choose a family. Voguing communities aren't just dance troupes, they're actually families, and these performers belong to houses led by usually house mothers and house fathers, and their names are adopted by their house founders. So tonight, I believe we'll have to get these chairs out of the way though, so I'll let you all stand. Before we do that, tonight we're going to be introducing an amazing group of ballroom community members, and this choreography, let's I'll grab my chair. Amazing group of ballroom community members, and their choreography was by Genovia Milan, and the dancers are Daphne Midnight, Lil Jojo St. Laurent, Lil Man Old Navy, Africa Juicy, Khalik Prodigy, Rocky Ebony, and Antonio Miguel.
No worries, no worries, no worries.
Ladies and gentlemen, we ask you to please remain seated throughout the entire performance. The use of recording devices and flash photography is strictly prohibited. Please make a note of all emergency exits, and thank you for not smoking. On your mark, get set, go!
Talagadoola, menchikaboola, bippity-boppity-boo. Put them together, and what have you got?
Watch the throw!
Bippity-boppity.
Talagadoola, menchikaboola, bippity-boppity-boo. Put them together, and what have you got? Bippity-boppity-boo now. Talagadoola, menchikaboola, bippity-boppity-boo now. They don't do magic, believe it or not. Bippity-boppity-boo! Now, Talagadoola means now I'm making a pool of rule. And for the thing of a bomb, that's a shot. So bippity-boppity-boo. Feel it.
Excuse me? Excuse me? My name is on the list.
Miss Thing, there is no guest list tonight.
What?
Thunder. And I'm about to make this motherfucking hot. Thunder. Are you ready? Thundercats. Ho! Said I don't know what you come to do. I don't know what you come to do. You and you and you and you. Said you and you and you. But I come to do my dance. Said I come to do my dance. Said I come to do my do my dance. Said I come to do my dance. Said I come to do my dance. Said I come to do my do my dance.
Sweetheart, with the cigarette, you're giving me a Banji girl effect. This is Banji.
Type T, 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 type T. Really with the mom. Really with the mom. Pussy cunt, 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 pussy. She's
I'm waiting for the music and then I can feel it, okay?
Bring it to the runway. Bring it to the runway.
Posed.
Bring it to the runway.
Posed. Let's get to it. Posed.
Walk for me.
Posed.
Walk for me. I'll see you after the function.
The gays, the straights, bisexuals, transsexuals, we're here.
Take your medication, Roman. The Roman holiday. This is what I do when a bitch breaks up.
Now it's time for a break.
How amazing was that? How amazing. I can't really death drop, but I can probably like slowly lay down and maybe get back up. But thank you all so much for coming out tonight. This has been a really, really great second annual State of the Out Youth Forum. I just want to give a special thanks to Scholastic for providing this space for us to gather tonight. To Reveal 42 for their amazing opening video that we saw earlier. And to our amazing dancers that we just saw. Let's give it up for them another time. Right. To our partnering organizations, True Colors Fund, the Trevor Project, Lambda Legal, the Human Rights Campaign, and GLSEN, thank you so much for your support and for your missions to make the world a better place for LGBTQ youth nationwide. So let's hear it for them as well. So I told you I would remind you again. Remember, if you're watching online, we want you to join that Google Plus Hangout with RJ Aguiar, Ethan Walker-Smith, and Gil Vijega. And if you scroll down on that page you're watching on right now, you'll find a link. And if you're in the auditorium, stick around and join us for our rooftop reception. And that's it for the State of the Out Youth Forum for this year. I hope we can continue these amazing conversations that we started tonight, and we hope you can join us again next year. Thank you.